Before I start, just for some context, when we talk about EVs, something that automatically comes to mind is, the climate problem that it also aims to solve. Interestingly, globally, 70% of, emissions are essentially attributable to cities. And if we look at the Indian context per se, about transport sector contributes to about 14% of the total emissions, out of which 90% interestingly come from the road sector, which incidentally also carries 80% of passengers and 80% of the freight, right? So EV has the real opportunity to solve that, but we often say that, Satish, that EVs are zero emitting vehicles. Do you believe that they are net zero emitting vehicles? Because the debate often is what happens from the cradle to grave across the life cycle of an EV. And that's where manufacturing comes into play as well, right? So what are your thoughts on this? Are they really net zero emitting vehicles?
So you can answer the question in many ways, depending upon who's sitting on the other side. You give an answer that they want to listen to. So if I'm one of those people living I live in Bangalore now. So we speak about EV in a very fashionable way. So I want to buy an EV scooter or an EV car because my net carbon footprint comes down. My private view is that's not the case. So depending upon where you start from, actually the carbon footprint in certain cases becomes higher than typical IC engines. And what do I mean by where do you start from? So if you start from where the battery is being sourced, the material, to the final production and then the life cycle of the scooter or car, the net carbon footprint at this point in time, you can say is higher than the IC engines. If you start from when the vehicle is being manufactured, you can argue that the EV is about half as bad as an IC engine. But what we don't talk about is how do we power the vehicles, yeah? So what happens is if I have an EV, I need to have electricity. If I need to have electricity, there's already a carbon footprint attached to it. It depends upon where do I generate power from. If I do it from clean sources, great. Then the impact of EVs is multiplying or compounded. However, if I'm generating it with the traditional coal making, which is unfortunately where the country is right now, then the debate starts changing quite a bit in the favor of IC engines. Having said that, EV is the future. So we need to now start changing the entire supply chain. So once we have the end consumers wanting to look at EVs, automatically the power generation, the electricity will hopefully start getting cleaner. And then you look at what kinds of batteries to be used and how do I manufacture these batteries, in which countries, what raw materials do I source, and how do I ship it to a place like India. So there is a lot going on. But like I said, the answer will depend upon who is speaking on one side and whom do you want to speak to. That's at least my view.
So that's very interesting. You touched on batteries. Touched upon batteries. That's such an important component that we need to talk about. I know Samir, you're from TJ Tires, but I'll ask you a question related to tires. But before that, what are your thoughts on the whole battery recycling debate? Because one issue that and when we talk about battery recycling, it's not just about assisting or aiding India's transition from a linear to a circular economy, or in terms of reduction of the carbon footprint, but also about materials self-sufficiency. What are your thoughts on the battery manufacturing and the reverse supply chain that's required for collection?
So when we are saying about the new fuel, the new fuel is battery. And I don't think that only the battery is only one solution for the EV. There can be several solutions like supercapacitor. And for sustainability, we can go for hydrogen, green hydrogen, and blue hydrogen also. So if we are focusing only on the battery, then it would be like a very limited scope for achieving the real sustainability goal what we are looking for. And when we are making the batteries for the EV, after the life of the EV, we can reuse it in different ways, like powering it for home or powering it for industries, like using it in inverter or something. And at the end of the life, maybe after 10 to 15 years, then there has to be recycling. then that can be used in again in the EV batteries. Then only we can be able to achieve the real sustainability goals what we are looking for. So there is a long way for the process, and there is not a single way that it would be only for the battery, but there should be more kinds of fuels from supercapacitor to hydrogen and other kinds of battery, not just this lithium ion or lead. There can be sodium batteries and other batteries as well.
No, thanks, Samir. And in fact, sticking on to you, let me ask you a follow-up question, right? In this whole EV narrative, we frequently talk about, batteries, drivetrains, so on. We often miss out on the debate about tires, right? And you represent TJ Tires here. Why don't you tell us all something about the work that you're doing at TJ Tires, and where does the sustainable manufacturing element come into that?
So when we started, we were trying to solve the road safety issues. So initially, our goal was to decrease the tire burst. So unfortunately, India, Bharat is number one in the road accidents, and around 20 to 25% is because of the tire burst. So we started with BPPC tire, that is burst preventive puncture curative tire. And when from R&D stage to production stage, when we went there, then we saw that we are decreasing at least 25% of replacement. 25% of the replacement is because of multiple tire punctures. So now when we are decreasing the tire punctures and tire burst, then we are definitely adding to the sustainability. So we didn't stop over there. We saw that there is a lot of usage of water while manufacturing, a lot of usage of coal in manufacturing. Then we are now developing the new kind of technology, that is zero emission production technology. And it is in the pilot stage. Maybe in 2 to 3 years we would be in the final stage, where we can decrease around 3.5 kg of carbon dioxide emissions per kg of tire manufacturing, and 6 liters, that's our aim, 6 liters of water shaving in each kg of tire manufacturing. And I believe this would be adopted by all kinds of tire manufacturers or all kinds of rubber manufacturers. Maybe it can be extended to all kinds of plastic manufacturers, which can also add to the sustainability goal of the EV sector.
Very interesting. No, thanks, Samir, for that. And but Satish, asking you, a follow-up question. I mean, it's all fine to talk about sustainability, but at the end of the day, businesses are largely also driven by profit. So there is always a sweet spot between sustainability and profitability, right? So where is that sweet spot, and how is you as a manufacturer would find that sweet spot between managing profitability and sustainability?
We're sitting in a room here, so I'll say, of course, there's a sweet spot. But the reality is, being circular or linear is a choice. It starts from what does the organization want to do, or where do you want to focus. Now, the good part is you have governance mechanisms. So you have the boards, you have, let's say, local regulations, which ask you to indicate what are you doing for the environment. So ESG is one such area, right? So given that, at some point in time, organizations or, let's say, regulated sectors are forced to indicate, what do I do for a circular economy? So what do I do to make sure that sustenance happens? So from that perspective, a sweet spot has to be found. Now, in our organization, and my organization is a subsidiary of Continental, amongst other things, they also make tires, by the way. We were just speaking before the panel. So Continental tried making tires out of plastic PET bottles or used PET bottles. And then they figured out that it was the Lamborghini of the tires, because it was way too expensive, but it was at least tried out. Now, of course, such a business might be highly sustainable, but will not be profitable. So it was a choice to say, do I discontinue or do I continue? The organization did not discontinue because they said, let's go ahead with innovation R&D. At some point in time, maybe there is a spot where what is sustainable is also profitable. I look at it differently, at least within our organization. I think sustainability gives a certain purpose to the brand, and employees identify to that purpose. So we always talk about, why do I come to office? I believe there are three reasons. One is it's a means to an end. I need the salary at the end of the month, so I come to office, do my work, go back home. A second is what I do makes a difference. And the third one is what I do is my life's purpose. And sustenance or sustainability can be tied to that second and the third reason. That I come to office, my employees come to office because they make a difference or there is a purpose. Once you bring in that element, automatically people start doing better and the organizational processes hopefully help you to get there. So my view, there must be clarity of purpose, why the organization exists. Therefore, you bring in clarity of roles for the people to know, I have to strive to become better because my brand does something for the larger good. It's not just about making money. I take my salaries, my bonuses. And the third is clarity of processes. So you make sure that somehow you complete the cycle of why you are sustainable and therefore how can you be profitable. So there is a sweet spot, but I believe that's very different for the organization that you're a part of and even for the industry that you might be in. So for certain organizations, I'm from Bangalore, like I said. For software organizations there, sustainability is more about putting solar panels on the roof so that you say, my car parking or my, let's say, common lobby area electricity is powered by solar. That's one way to look at sustainability. It's an attempt. Then there are manufacturing organizations like ours which say, I'm going to buy raw material from a country which is not into geopolitical strife or where my logistical costs are not as high, creating a larger carbon footprint. I mean, when you take from the beginning of conceptualization of the product till doing series production. So where you bring in your sustainability story depends upon what organization you're a part of. But I think it's mandatory in some form. And like I said, in well-regulated organizations or boards, you will be forced to do this whether you like it or not. I do believe you can also create a certain passion and vigor for employees to participate it in a broader way. So that's at least my take on it.
No, thanks, Satish. That does throw a lot of light. So, Sameer, one question is that what are your thoughts on, the entire life cycle of not just an EV, but also the tires? Because, you also represent that element of an EV. Because, when I was at Niti Aayog, one of the projects that we did was like the life cycle assessment of EVs from cradle to grave, right? So how important do you think does a life cycle assessment become for not just EVs as a whole, but individual components of EVs as well?
At this point of time, the focus is mostly the vehicle. But after some time, that the focus is to be on the component level. So if all the components are not sustainable, if all the components are not achieving the net zero kind of target, then at a whole, the achievement of net zero is not possible. So might be tire, might be battery, might be brake, might be anything else. So that each component has to meet the net zero target. And that would be slow, and for that there has to be lots of innovations. It's not going to happen in one day. And innovation, I am saying that the innovation cannot be frugal innovation. There has to be some deep tech into it, and there has to some investment of time and manpower into it. Maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years also. So, but it would be achievable. And like Satish said that. Whether it would be sustainability or profitability, and I believe that without profit the companies cannot run. So in each case the profitability will definitely come before the sustainability, but with lots of R&D and brainstorming on the sustainable solution itself, the profitability can be achieved. And it may take some time, but definitely each component would be sustainable as well as profitable.
Thanks, Sameer. That's sure, please.
So I was just reading, there's a McKinsey report done across 2,500 large organizations, mostly manufacturing, which states that organizations which are profitable and sustainable have a very differentiated value proposition amongst their competitors. So I'm not saying being sustainable helps you to be profitable or the other way around, but if you do both, somehow there is a differentiation from your peers. So maybe that's something that we can learn from.
I'm sure that's a very pragmatic thought. The other thing is, we're all witnessing a lot of disruption. I mean, the theme here is disruption today, right? And AI seems to be omnipresent. Everybody is talking about AI, how it's, the biggest disruptive force that exists today. Now let's apply it to, sustainable manufacturing of EVs. So Satish, how do you think AI finds its way into the process automation that is required for sustainable manufacturing, but also for advanced analysis that might be required in terms of over the life cycle of materials and so on?
before I directly answer that question, how many of us here know that there is an AI-based tech in this event where if you log into this, I think it's called some photography, So it scans your face and then finds any group picture that has been taken anywhere and uploads it to a certain, and you get it as an email, yeah? So, I mean, AI...
That scares me as much as it fascinates me, but...
Tech is good, intent is questionable, yeah? So, that's AI at its very basic use case, yeah? If I just map it, it's a bad joke. You can map that to a manufacturing industry and say, I know who's working and who's not. So where did I see my people and where I didn't? But that's one way to look at it. That's not what I advocate. AI helps in a variety of things. So first is, just to define AI, AI is the possibility for me with a mathematical model with small changes in parameters, and yet I create the outcome that is necessary. So that's at least my way of looking at AI from a industry standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint. There are many use cases where AI helps get better. First and foremost is inventory and warehouse management. So you have this Toyota pioneered the just-in-time, right? Now you don't need people or ledger books or Excel sheets to tell you, or databases to tell you what part do I need for what time of the month. Everything is AI managed. So I know, for example, during Diwali, I will have a certain number of car sales. Therefore, 1 or 2 months before Diwali, I will need the possibility for these many parts, which will help me produce these many cars or scooters, and that has to be shipped out to dealerships. So this data can be completely analyzed and made available for you as an input long before you get to that part of the year. So that's one way it helps. The second way, which is my favorite, is predictive maintenance. So you have the possibility to predict when my machine will wear down. We use that in the automotive, in automotive in cars. So you have predictive maintenance these days, which tells you when my brake pad is going to wear, when I will need to change my brake pad. Compared to how it is maybe in some forms today, you give it to a service center and the guy says, 12 mahine ho gaye, you will have to change the air filter or the brake pad. Now you don't know whether the filter or the pad has really deteriorated. Does it need to change? You just go with blind trust, right? So that will change. So with AI, you will have the possibility to tell where the wear and tear of your machinery will happen. So it's a very, very powerful use case in terms of predictive maintenance. You have smaller examples which are already implemented, robotic automation. You don't need human beings anymore to fix doors in a production line. So those things are already happening. So I believe AI is the only way that we can better refine our business, collect data points, and make sure that we make as fewer mistakes as possible during the entire production life cycle. But it's there to stay.
Oh, very interesting, Satish, and I'll probably pick your brains on this after this round of questions, is also the concept of digital twins, right? Today, you have digital twins of everything, starting from cities to even manufacturing processes, and how you can play around with that to look at the predictive element and the life cycle. That's going to be very interesting, so I'll have a follow-up question on that. But for now, staying on the theme of disruption, Samir, you would have seen that the union budget of India has been very, very pragmatic every single year. Last year, AI centers of excellences were announced in multiple institutes, so that's speaking to the theme of AI. This year, Honorable Finance Minister, spoke about not just a 1 lakh crore corpus fund for R&D, but also that in the future we can expect, deep tech related schemes. So where do you see the convergence between deep tech and, the EV manufacturing ecosystem?
That's an interesting question, and even I didn't expect that to see deep tech in the budget, and I am surprised, and I'm very happy that the government is looking into the deep tech space seriously at this point of time. I believe, you remember 10 years back when Modi ji started the Startup India. On those days, I was working in one of the largest automotive manufacturer in India. And before that, I didn't have the guts to leave the job and start a startup. And afterwards, I got the courage to start the startup. So I believe that when the deep tech starts with the government's narratives and others, so I believe that there would be thousands of deep techs lying somewhere in some labs, somewhere in some other firms, R&D centers and others, but that would not be seeing the light of the day, or they would not be getting implemented because of some issues, maybe the funding issues or acceptability issues or something. So now, as there would be some investment in the deep tech space, I believe that there would be lots of inventors turning into entrepreneurs like me, and they would be coming out with new technologies in the material space, in the manufacturing space, or in some component space. And that deep tech will definitely change the way we are looking into the vehicles at this point of time. And this will actually be the differentiator between other competitors in the world, like China or ASEAN countries, versus Bharat. So this deep tech push impetus will definitely bring us to the limelight globally, and we as an Indian, we are quite innovator, and we have a very good faculty to innovate, and I believe that this new innovations will definitely make a change, differentiating feature for all the vehicles, the copycats, and we will be bringing new kinds of vehicles which would be much more sustainable and less ownership cost, and we will be achieving the market leadership throughout the globe.
Very interesting. Thanks, Samir. Satish, would you have any thoughts on deep tech, and also in terms of where the convergence is, what Samir shed light on, but equally, because the Honorable Finance Minister also announced that a future scheme is possible, not for this space, but they didn't say not for this space, they said overall for deep tech, but what would this deep tech scheme from the government for this, sector potentially look like?
Oh, very difficult question to answer, to be honest. So as sitting on the industry side or the private sector side, what I'm looking for is access or collaboration, let's put it that way. So as long as we have the possibility to collaborate within the ecosystem to either make or buy the deep tech, it's great. Right now, the use cases is, at least in my mind, not clear. So in automotive, we use this term called software-defined vehicle. Yeah. So you don't talk about vehicles being manufactured the normal way. Of course, you still manufacture it the same way, but then instead of starting from, let's say, how my mechanical design or how the picture of the car will look like, we are talking about software-defined, which means we first draw out the architecture of the vehicle, the electric lines, where do I need what kind of electronics, and therefore what do I need to do from a software perspective. And why is that important? Because every I don't know how many of us here change phones every 1 to 3 years, so I'm assuming a lot of us, yeah? Anybody who changes phones greater than 3 years? Oh, there are quite a few people, okay. I'm one of those. My daughter is 14. It's 3 years since she got her first phone, and she's like, "Dad, I need a new phone." I see some eyebrows. Maybe I'm not a good dad with that comment. But in my peer circle, I don't see people using the same phone beyond 1 to 3, 4 years at max. Yeah? And most of the times, of course, there is a societal pressure, but there is also the need to change because you realize that the apps that you're using are suddenly slow. Yeah? So there is also a tech need. Why does that happen? Because the hardware that you're using, the chip, the silicon that you're using is no longer capable of running the kind of tech or software at the same speed that it used to a couple of years ago. It is only a matter of time that this starts happening in automotive. And if you pick, for example, Indian two-wheeler EV manufacturers, they're also designing scooters ground up, which means from a tech perspective. What this means is access to tech, access to collaborative partners, access to startups will have a huge impact on what is the kind of product and the quality that you launch. So it's only a matter of time before this will become clearer. But at this point in time, it's great that we have the first step. We will need to figure out what this means for the industry.
Yeah, and Satish, staying on the theme of disruption only, because I mentioned digital twins, I'm sure a lot of folks here already know what digital twins are, but could you tell us, and if not for context, it's basically a 3D model of everything from cities to, manufacturing, supply chains, and so on, where you're able to, just simulate what an ideal outcome could look like, and also use it to better plan, streamline, optimize your processes in case of manufacturing, in case of cities, to basically better plan cities, but it applies across sectors. Where do you see the role of, digital twins in the sustainable manufacturing space?
Again, before I answer the question, I'll quote what the Minister of Railways pointed out this morning in the other room. He said there are digital twins for each of the train stations that are being built. Yeah? I was asking myself, how does that help? Of course, you get to know how to walk through a station. You get to know where the restrooms are. You get to know what's the easiest path. But the more important part of aspect of a digital twin there is to identify how are my pipes running, how are my electrical wires running. I'll take a real life example. So again, where I'm staying in Bangalore, and if there are Bangaloreans here, no offense. So there's a Gale gas pipeline. So you have gas pipes these days, you don't have cylinders. And where I'm staying right outside my place, there was some road construction work happening, and they cut the gas pipeline. Other than the fact that 3 days there was no gas at home, which is the smaller part, for about 100 meters around that place, all the cigarette pan bidi shops were shut down because you couldn't smoke, and people were not allowed to smoke anywhere nearby, which makes sense, right? I was just asking myself, we talk about digital twins. So in my industry, in automotive, we talk about digital twins on a daily basis. So how could it be that you dig a road, but you don't know there is a high pressure gas pipeline, and we are so fortunate that nobody passed away, nobody died. So this is a real life use case. And when I heard the minister talk about digital twins, I thought first time we are now valuing human lives, and we are talking about doing things in a way where before I enter a problem area, let's say the power is not there or the pipe's broken, I know exactly what I'm touching. Now, this is the way typically the Western world works. We have been very dekha jayega types. So we have a very different take on chalta. I didn't want to say chalta somehow seems very disrespectful, but we have a certain respect or a lack of it when we come to these laborers working on these topics. And I believe this is where the digital twin concept helps tremendously. Now, when we come to, your question was regarding sustainable manufacturing. Industries having digital twins will become a mandate at some point in time, because that's the only way that you can try and solve day-to-day problems that you might get. So if you have a line which is broken down, if you have something that has gone wrong, either with the power, with a part not coming, or a production line, or a conveyor belt, you know exactly where to look into the problem and solve it. So your turnaround time or your downtime comes down tremendously, and your ability to solve the problem becomes that much more focused and quick. So digital twins are a great way to make sure that you also get your hands dirty on a 3D model before you get into the real deal. It's more like, I don't know if I have a live use case, but if I want to change something in my car, which would be very dangerous if I am a novice, I try it out on a 3D model first. I don't know how many of you have seen the Avengers movie. I think it was the last. It was called not Endgame. Endgame. I think that was the last one, where Robert Downey Jr. creates the time heist on a 3D model, and I think that's a classic use case. Before you, in the movie at least, he plays around with time travel, but before you do that, you have a 3D model rendered, and you validate that your idea is qualified and built in a 3D model before you push it down. I'll just take one more minute. If you bring it to the automotive world, today if you buy a two-wheeler EV, any one of the manufacturers that we have, either in India or foreign, you will almost find every manufacturer saying, take the scooter and push a software update. Yeah? Sounds cool, because we're used to mobile phones having software updates, which largely works. Imagine if the software update that on your two-wheeler EV scooter doesn't work. So on the phone, something not working is just an irritant. On the scooter, it is life-threatening. Would you allow somebody to push software over the air without having tried and tested? You want them to test it. However, two-wheeler EV manufacturers will argue that that needs a lot of investment. Front-loading needs to be done. A typical, if you're talking about driver assistance features, you need at least 2 to 10 million kilometers of driving on the road before you say that the algorithm is working fine. This is the car braking on its own, or the car identifying a certain animal or being on the street. Where do you get this money? So there's an argument that VC will fund it, but venture capitalists are also there to make money. So you cannot just assume that everything will be done in the real world. And this is another great advantage of the digital world, where you have the possibility to test whatever it is that you're pushing down onto the vehicle, and you at least take care of almost all real life use cases. Maybe there are some corner cases that still might not work, but you at least make sure that what's being pushed down to the vehicle then is of a certain quality and at least it's not life threatening. So it's a great way. I truly believe that's the only way the automotive industry at least will move forward. Automotive industry is under severe financial distress right now, unless of course you're a startup. But the only way that you can cut costs now is to get into the digital twin space.
Thanks, Satish. That's a very comprehensive and a fascinating answer. And normally, moderators don't have a point of view, but I do have one, which is that I strongly believe that digital twins will be the future across all sectors. And I play around with them quite a bit, to be honest. But shifting gears now, Samir, tell me something. It's going to be unfair if we also don't look at the challenges that you as manufacturers, would be facing, right? So can you help us with what kind of challenges do you face, A, with manufacturing, but B, more so with sustainable manufacturing, which is the theme here today? What are the roadblocks? What are some of the challenges that you experience?
As a startup,
Either?
so as a startup, the biggest challenge is paying the employee and then paying the rent for the every month at the on first date of the month. So here, jokes apart, here I would like to say that whenever we are actually competing with China, and when you go to China, then you will see that all the similar kinds of industries would be clustered in some areas, and you can find out different options for buying from A, B, C, or D. But here we are getting some funding. That's not a problem. But when we see that we have to find out a location for ourselves, we have to make a manufacturing setup over there. We have to go through all the processes of compliances and government approvals and documentation. And being an innovator or other people, these kind of innovators are not very great in doing all the documentations also. So I believe that this challenge can be taken care of by doing similar infrastructure like STPI. So 20 years or 30 years back, when software was nascent, 30, 40 years back, then Software Technology Park of India was started, and slowly lots of people came over there. They started some small software companies, and they started giving services, and it was like a plug and play kind of thing. So why can't we make a plug and play kind of manufacturing facilities for large number of automobiles manufacturers, EV manufacturers, and the component manufacturers, where there can be shared resources and shared facilities where all the people can come over there. Maybe initially the startup can give small rent, 5 rupees, 6 rupees, 10 rupees per square feet kind of thing. Once they come to a profitable range, then the government can ask, or the institute can ask for a 25 rupees or 30 rupees per square feet. So the first biggest challenge is finding a good place to start your manufacturing. And here I want that as a manufacturer, I wish that there should be some model like STPI. Secondly, the funding is definitely an issue. The VC funding is available. The CVC funding is available. But debt funding is still an issue for the manufacturing sector. As we don't have the history, so whenever we go to the banks, then the bank will say that you don't have any history. So if I had an history, then I would not have come to the bank. The bank would be rushing to me. So when we went to SIDBI, then SIDBI said that you don't have land and you are in a lease shed, and tomorrow if you take out all the machines, then how can I get my money back? So this is the attitude of the debt funding, and that's an issue. And similar issues are for all the manufacturers. So there has to be some other kind of funding for manufacturing sectors, not just equity, not just debt. There might be some convertible instruments and others. And for that, there has to be some push from CVC side or automobile sector side that will help the manufacturer to do some easy manufacturing stuff in a faster pace. Maybe 5 years can be squeezed to 3 years. And third, I will say that there are vendor issues also. So we don't know which vendor to rely on. So let's suppose we order one machine and the vendor will be saying that I will be providing those machines in 3 months, but the machines will be reaching after 9 months or 12 months. So that would be a long period of time, and I would have to outsource those parts from some other manufacturer, and I don't know about the reliability of the parts. So these issues has to be solved, and here the FICCI, CI, SOCM kind of organizations can help to solve this problem. And if all the people come together, then we can definitely faster solve this problem in a very faster way.
No, thanks, Samir. I'm glad you got the issue of financing as well, because innovative financing, I believe, is the need of the hour. Everything from first loss guarantees to blended finance. But what if I pose the same question to you, Satish? What would be, let's say, the top 2 challenges that you see here?
From an EV manufacturing
Correct.
Oh, top 2 would be very difficult because I think there are many at the same priority level.
Yeah.
I think the first is the commercial logic. So, and what I mean by that is the reason why you exist in that business. I believe there are a lot of brands who are there because they think there is quick money to be made. And I have no offense to startups, but there is a cycle. You come into a business for a certain reason because you want to make a fantastic product, or the question about profitability and sustainability. So that's the first part for me. The second one is the tech that you use. So EV is a lot about tech and less about typical production. Third is that segment is fairly fragmented. So the supply chain is very fragmented, like Samir pointed out. So you don't really know whom you can depend on, who are the compliant organizations that you can depend on. So that part is fairly fragmented. And last but not the least, I think the Indian consumer the end consumer still hasn't figured out how to look at EV. Am I buying an EV because I'm doing a favor on the planet? There are two-wheeler EV manufacturers who are selling scooters today at less than half the cost price. So there is a scooter that I don't want to quote the name, but the manufacturing cost is between 2.5 to 3.5 lakhs, but this scooter retails at about 1.5 lakhs. So organizations are taking a huge gamble by saying EV will grow. And that prediction can be, if gone wrong, can have serious repercussions to the industry. There's one tier 1 supplier based in the US. They supply mostly EV stuff, sensors and actuators for 4-wheelers. And Morgan Stanley has just downgraded them and indicated that the EV adoption across the world is not that fast, and therefore that organization has been downgraded, and the stocks are unfortunately down by about 10%. So the real problem, I believe, is how the economic viability of this industry looks like. I am not a big fan of asking the government for funding, because government can only step in to that much extent. I mean, the FAME 2, I believe, was also misused to a certain extent. I think the industry and the end consumer need to come to a point where they understand, why do I need an EV and what does the EV manufacturer and the product stand for? It's a very abstract answer, I know, but that's why I said it's very difficult to identify one or two very concrete things. It's an ideology issue in my view.
No, fair enough, Satish, but stay with me there. You mentioned the fragmentation aspect, and that actually just makes me think, what do you think is the role of standardization here? Because standardization, we frequently talk about standardization of, let's say, charging standards, standardization of, battery standards, and so on and so forth. But beyond that, what does it look like for the supply chain in terms of not just optimizing processes, but also, reducing the carbon footprint?
Again, a difficult question to answer, because you have individual brands wanting to make profits or wanting to exist, and then there is a larger good that you're doing on the planet. So I don't know if there is a balance yet. I believe standardization is the only way to move forward, because we also use the word EV quite loosely. Yeah? So EV, like Samir already pointed out, there's battery. In certain cases, it's hydrogen. In certain cases, there's something else. And then within battery, you have lithium, you have manganese, you have cobalt. And you have manufacturers setting up their manufacturing scooters or cars based on where do I have access to these raw materials. Yeah? So if somebody says I have a great insight into the Democratic Republic of Congo, which provides the maximum cobalt, I will set up my tech based on cobalt. Yeah? So there is a certain conflict from that standpoint. Therefore, charging standardization is already a problem. So how do you standardize if you don't even know whether I'll be hydrogen or fuel cell or what battery? So that's the first challenge. However, how you develop the EV ground up definitely can be standardized. So there is a certain software standard in Europe. It's called AutoSAR. It's about standardizing the middleware. So in typically, if you're using a laptop, it's either Windows or iOS, right? So you don't care about whether I'm plugging a USB Type-C or Type-A or a LAN port, yeah? So you don't care about that. Why? Because the Windows operating system completely takes care of it. If you move to a Mac, it's the same. So there's certain amount of standardization or standard that you expect. This can be achieved, and you come to a point where you say, I will collaborate on standards, but I will compete on implementation. So that's the part that I think the industry must move towards. The fragmentation then becomes a bit clearer, and then governance becomes easier. So you know what your account or what you're auditing a certain organization for. So my mantra is cooperate on standards, compete on implementation.
Very interesting. And because you mentioned collaboration, my next question to you then, Samir, would be on the collaboration side. You know, we know competition is healthy, but could collaboration be healthier? And what I really mean by that is that, you know, you have startups today which are coming up with fascinating solutions, yours being case in point. You've got the academia and research institutions coming up with cutting-edge solutions. You've got the bigger industries also coming up with their own solutions and interventions. What do you think a healthy collaboration model in this space looks like? I know the center of excellence, COE type of model is quite catching up, but in sustainable EV manufacturing, what do you think a good collaboration mechanism could look like?
Without collaboration, you cannot even exist.
That is true.
So collaboration has to be there, and collaboration, I believe that initially the collaboration would be on the technology part. So let's suppose one startup or one EV manufacturer or one component manufacturer has come up with a new good kind of technology for sustainability or decreasing the cost significantly. Then the startup or the manufacturer might not be able to make that kind of scale that is required in the market. So there might be some capacity available with other guys, and in that case, they might manufacture those parts which are more sustainable in the capacity available, so that the capex that has already gone into the to the manufacturing will be properly utilized, and where the revenue can be generated from the both ends, the technology innovator as well the startup or the company who has the capacity. This is one part of the collaboration. Second part is about the center of excellence, where the deep tech kind of technologies might be coming up. And here I feel that there will be some gaps, because from the lab to the road, there is lots of gaps, and taking from lab level technology to the road level technology, it takes at least 3 to 4 years, maybe 6 to 7 years also. So here there has to be some other players who can bring the technology up to that level where it can be implemented. And today I don't know which kind of players will be coming into this field. Maybe new kind of startups can come up who can make it available for a larger market, who can implement the technology developed in academia or some PhD thesis or R&D setup of any IITs to implement in any of the sustainable EV manufacturing part. Third thing, I believe that in the marketing part also there can be collaboration. So here we have to learn from Toyota and Maruti. So the manufacturing facilities are shared, and they are manufacturing similar vehicles and selling it in their respective sales network and with their quality and with their services. So similar things might be available for startups also, and that will definitely enhance the use of capex to the maximum level and use of decreasing the working capital requirement also.
Thanks, Samir. And just a follow-up question, what is the role of regulation, do you think, in this space? What does an enabling regulatory framework look like which promotes sustainable EV manufacturing and other associate elements like collaboration, greater research, and so on? What do you think a good regulatory framework could look like from the government's side, perhaps?
Government doesn't have much role to play at the beginning. When a innovation has come to one level where it is hitting the road and it is becoming popular,
Yep.
then the standardization and regulations will be coming,
Yeah.
and there would be discussions on that. And there should, in all regulations and standardization, there has to be some scope for new innovations as well. So it should not be watertight that there cannot be any new innovation. Like when I was in college and when I talked to my juniors, when they tried to innovate in the Formula 3 cars. That is a very small thing. So those innovations were not appreciated, and their team was disqualified because they have changed from the standardization they have done. And in that case, you are killing the scope of innovation from the very nascent stage. So there has to be some level of scope where the innovation would be encouraged. And when it is going to a mass level, and if it is not harming the safety part, then they should be definitely allowed.
No, point taken, point taken. And I think we're almost on time. But one question to Satish now would be, this year, last year we emerged out of a very historic G20 presidency. At India's behest, African Union became a member of G20. And, India is also very invested in the African Union. Do you see AU or the emerging economies in general as a great market? And more importantly, do you see the emerging economies, the global south, so as to say, as places where India's model in sustainable EV manufacturing could actually be replicated?
A market, absolutely yes, because they represent a significant portion of the human population on the planet. So absolutely yes. I see it evolving in two phases. One is the export. So I think India can manufacture today and export to the African Union, and there are takers there. And then I believe we also have the moral responsibility to make sure that AU does not fail. So if you read through the geopolitical parameters of that continent, things can go awfully wrong, given the fact that we have conflicts and strife literally everywhere else in the world. So I think we have a responsibility to bring them up, and therefore I would love for a lot of Indian manufacturers potentially to have set up their, hopefully one day you, in Africa, so that we also help bring the African economy come up. But a market, absolutely yes.
Okay, and on that note, I think last words, 20 seconds from each of you perhaps. So Samir, starting with you, what is the one big development that you look forward to in the next 5 years in this sector? Look forward to, or you see coming, or in this sector, sustainable EV manufacturing?
I believe that there would be some new kinds of battery technologies, and in each segments of each components of the EV sector, may it be motor, may it be tires, there will be lots of innovations, so which would be contributing to sustainability.
Satish, what about you?
I hope in less than a decade we don't have to speak like this, and we know this comes automatically. It should come naturally, business as usual.
Very interesting. And again, the last one would be, where do you see the sector 10 years from now? Sustainable EV manufacturing, where do you see it 10 years from now?
I hope it is established.
Okay.
And I say I hope because there's a large responsibility that organizations play.
Samir, what about you?
I believe that we would be the largest, Bharat would be the largest manufacturer of EV and would be the market leader globally.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think with that, we come to a close. So hand it back over to the audience in case there are any audience questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha. When we have panelists like yourselves here, I'm sure that my audience would love to ask some questions. I'd like to request you to please introduce yourself and ask the first question, ma'am. I'd like to request all of you to please keep your questions brief so that we can take at least a few questions before we wrap up.
Yeah,
Please.
thank you. This was a very enriching panel, and it's also a concept that has been debated by a lot of people. My name is Shreya Ramachandran. I head sustainability for a global engineering firm called Ramble. And my question to the audience, the panelists here, is that EV as an industry is seen as a pursuit for sustainability. And especially given that India has an ambitious target of achieving net zero by 2070. However, there are underpinning factors. For example, for the EV manufacturing itself requires a lot of inputs from rare earth, which is perceived as energy and resource intensive. And also the charging infrastructure per se requires still the dependence on thermal. How do you see filling this gap? Because I feel this is more like information asymmetry, a problem, then actually a problem. But how do you see, filling this gap, A? B, what kind of systemic changes you as industry see on the policy level, and how you as industry can work with a policy maker to fill this gap?
So what you said is absolutely right. I'll just add one more, flip it even further. Decomposition of a battery takes arguably a century. Yeah. So I mean, we talk about that reverse circularity, where you can decompose battery, take out parts, reuse. We are not yet there. So there are huge challenges. That's why for the first question, I'm not so certain if using EV is better than using ICE, but that's my private view. To answer your question, you spoke about rare earth. Rare earth comes from one country which we don't like to do business with. I think you know it's one of the largest countries on the planet, or second largest economy. And EV therefore becomes, it is difficult because if I don't go to China for rare earth, if I don't go to Congo for cobalt, where do I go? Lithium, I can go to South America. But then you start including what's the cost of shipping lithium from South America to India. So there are lots of questions to be answered. I believe at this point in time, looking at EV is probably the only thing we can do. And we will need to figure out a lot of things that you've asked, that you've pointed out. So answers are not yet there. What would I want from the policymakers? I would want a certain time window in which we make sure that we get better in terms of whatever targets we have set for ourselves. I also want, I don't know if I can say this for governments, but at least for private organizations, the target cannot be 20, 30, 40 years into the future. I would really want the policymakers to say every organization, irrespective of what industry, what you do, you need to have a target in the next 10, maximum 15 years. Then you have the pressure for innovation. Hopefully that will answer the question. Or maybe in 10 years down the line, we won't be speaking about EV, but something else. But I don't have an answer to the question, except that all of us have a role to play.
Recycling of the battery is the only answer at this point of time, and I believe whoever cracks the technology, he will be the next Elon Musk from Bharat.
I see we have about another 3 minutes. So are there any follow-up questions?
Hi, this is Sukant. And first of all, I absolutely coincide with you that India should become and will become one of the largest EV manufacturer. But as rightly pointed out by her, if you look at the source of lithium and cobalt, is mostly either in South America or cobalt, we can talk about Congo. There, do you think so we have missed the bus? Because majority of these mines, including Australia, are plus 50% owned by China. We have missed the bus on semiconductors. Do you think so? Are we behind or we are in line?
So I won't say that the train has left the station. I think we still have the chance. So it's moving. We need to now jump and get into it. The good part is, although these mines, and very rightly pointed out, at least I didn't speak about Australia because they are owned by China. We will need to figure out a way to work with them. The standoffish relationship that we've had so far, I mean, the world is having with China potentially would need to change. There is, of course, the need for the Chinese government to change as well. but it will happen. So once you have alternate sources of supply chain, things will hopefully get better. But we have to keep in mind that rare earth currently is sourced only from one country. So I don't know if we've missed the bus, but how much can we dig our country to find out chemicals that probably don't exist, or metals that we can't find in the country. So I believe we will need to figure out a way to, we will need to pacify the global supply chain in some form. If we have the conflict-driven approach that we've had so far, it will only become that much longer to have sustainability due to electric vehicles. I'm sorry, I can't give the answer that people want to listen to.
Yeah, because see, not only Australia, 52% of the mines in Congo,
Indonesia,
73% in Argentina, Bolivia, all are already, majority is owned by China. And I'm talking about the 100% production, barring what we have just claimed recently, 5.3 million tons in Jammu. But with that in mind, and knowing 85% of the processing of these is happening in China, how are we going to have that competitive advantage? And the same in 90s and 2000s, when we missed the bus on semiconductor devices. Please.
We missed the bus in manufacturing of the mobile phones, but now we are the perhaps second or third largest manufacturer of mobile phones. And here we have not yet missed the bus, and I believe that we will be definitely finding out. The government is smart enough to find out the ways and how to deal with that. And perhaps if we can find out it in Jammu and Kashmir, there would be lots of other places where there would be lots of mines hidden, and we don't know about that. I believe we will definitely find out something.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Final question to the gentleman on the first table. Yes, please.
Myself Sunil Upadhyay, and from the solar industry. I want to, biggest challenge in the EV industry is the cost of ownership. And the cost of ownership is being led by the cost of the batteries as well. So how do you see the super capacitor batteries can make a revolutionary challenge in making the cost of the ownership down?
In EV, battery is a very big issue, and so if we are taking the life cycle of 3 years or 4 years of battery, then it is the cost of battery would be an impediment for the cost of ownership. But when we increase the life of the battery for 15 years and we reuse it in inverter or home appliances and other places, then definitely the cost would be decreasing. So there would be after sales of the battery, and there would be some value or some good amount of value can be extracted from the reuse of that. And third point is that when we can recycle the battery and again make the similar or better performing batteries in after few years, then perhaps we will be able to make economically viable battery solutions.
Basically, my question is regarding supercapacitor batteries. Supercapacitor batteries are not using, they are using the capacitor as the storage of charge or the storage of the energy. So the supercapacitor can bring the cost very much down.
Yeah,
So
I
how
agree.
do you see this?
I
It
agree.
can be enabled into the EV industry.
So in supercapacitor, one of my friends startup is working in Pune, and I have seen that they are trying to mix match both capacitor and the battery. And while giving the acceleration, they are using the supercapacitor, and then for maintaining the speed, they are using the battery. Some kinds of similar solutions might be possible in future, and in that case, the weight of the battery or the requirement of the battery will definitely decrease, and that would be more sustainable.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir.
And let me take this opportunity by thanking our panelists, our moderator for this very interesting session that has been hosted by Joy E-Bikes. Let's hear a round of applause.